Hi, I'm Deirdre. I'm one half of Quilted Crow Girls Designs. We've purchased this beautiful antique quilt circa 1850 and we've called it the Cutter's Walk. And today we're going to show you how to piece the centre star. The points of the stars are made from two stripped piece sets where you need to cut two 2¼ inch strips from both your prints and sew them right sides together down their long edge. You need to iron the seam allowance towards the cheddar print. You also need to cut them out using Templastic. So you make a template from your Templastic and you need to position it with the centre line on your Templastic running down the centre line of your seam. When you're doing this, it can slip about. So one of the tips we do is to add just a little dab of glue to just one side of your Templastic and then position it down, lining it up on your seam line. Just press it in the middle and that'll stop the template from slipping about as you cut it. Then it's just a matter of lining it up like you would do any rotary cutting and slice off even with the edges of your template, going around all 5 sides. If your template is a little bit hard to see against the fabric, drawing a 1/4 inch line on the edge of it helps focus, adding a bit of darkness there. Once you've cut out all the points of your star, you need to use a light pencil and just using the 1/4 inch line of your ruler, draw a 1/4 inch line around all 5 edges. This will be your sewing line and help with lining up the pieces as you go. With the pie plates shapes, I've already cut them out. You can actually rotary cut the 2 straight sides. With the template, just draw along the curved side and cut it out with scissors. And then draw your line on the 2 straight sides, but you don't need a line on the curved edge. Once you've cut out all your star points, we need to start sewing them together. And the first seam that needs to be sewn is this long edge of each of the points. So just place 2 point sets right sides together, lining them up well, and then put a pin in where those 2 seams are going to cross over each other, and then another one at the bottom. Start sewing right where those 2 lines are crossing over each other, so just drop the needle in right on that drawn line. Do 1 or 2 little stitches and just do a little reverse just to lock your seam off, and then just start sewing to the end. And stop right where the 2 lines cross over each other again. Do another little reverse stitch, and that's your first 2 sets sewn together. Now we're going to sew our 3rd star point to the first 2. So it's the same thing, just lining the drawn lines up from the edges of the fabric, but just make sure that your seam on the back is out of the way. So just line up your edges and then just finger press the previous seam back out of the way so that you're not going to catch it in your sewing. Start sewing again right where those two drawn lines cross over each other. And stop on the same bottom point. So now we've sewn all of our 10 star points together and it's forming a ring. We've just got this one last seam to do here. So that's just very easy to do. You just fold right sides together and line it up just as you've done with all your other star points. Pin the 2 together and sew that last seam. So now we just sew that very last seam in the same way that we did all of the other star points, starting from the top and working our way through that drawn line at the bottom. Do a little back stitch and take it out. So now we have all our star points sewn into a ring. So we need to iron the seams. So it's just a matter of pressing the newly sewn seam in the same direction as the centre seams. So just let the seams go down where they want to and just fan them around all in the same direction. And that way it won't be too bulky. The seams will all just be running over each other. When it's nice and flat, just turn it over and give it a little press on the front. This hole here is actually going to be covered by the centre circle applique once you've finished everything else. Okay, we're going to sew our first pie shape to the top left hand side, or the cheddar print of our star point. You need to fold this fabric down out of the way. Where you started sewing the first time is where you want to finish sewing this time. So you need to have those two seams crossing over each other. You can fold it back out of the way so that you know where it's going to be, and just put a pin right on those 2 points. Then just angle your fabric up along the edge of your cheddar print, and again put a pin to hold it in place. I like to pin it from this side, but I find it easier to sew from this side. So I just turn it over, and where I've got these two lines coming together, that's where I'm going to start sewing from. So just drop your needle right down into that point. Start sewing, do a little back stitch, and then sew right to the very tip of your point. Hit that right on, do a little reverse, and then take the fabric out. What we have here is the tip of your star isn't actually sewn down, it's still able to be moved about. So now we've sewn our pie shape to the cheddar side of the star point, you're now going to sew it to the red side of the star point. So that's just a matter of manipulating the fabric around, turning it over so you can see where these seams are coming together. Edge the fabric up so that they're properly aligned, and you can pull this seam, this fabric down. You don't want to catch any of that in your seam, so just make sure that this is pulled down out of the way. You're going to put a pin in where those two seams cross over each other, and then just bring the fabric up so that the edges are lined up. Pin the two together again. This time we're going to start sewing from this top point, again where the two drawn lines cross over each other. So drop your needle down on that point and sew along the edge, and we're going to stop sewing right where the previous seam came up to that corner. Do a little reverse and again take it out. So now we have our second pie shape that we're going to sew in. So the starting point is the same as the previous one. You just need to fold your fabric down out of the way and bring the edge of the two fabrics together. Where that drawn line crosses over should be connected up to the drawn line on the underside. The two together and take the two edges up together, and you've got this little dog ear that's sticking out here. We're actually going to cross our second pie shape over the top of that first one. And when we start sewing, we're going to start right out here on the outside edge. This outside edge will actually be covered by the reverse circle that goes around the whole outside edge, so you don't need to worry about them not being exactly lined up. It will be covered by another seam. So just sew along your drawn line. And again, stop sewing right where those two seams cross over each other. We've sewn all our pie shapes around the points of the star, and we've sewn the very last one to the cheddar side. Now we have to sew it to the red side. So it's the same as you did previously. It's actually easier to do it from this side of the fabric. So turn it over, line up your edges, make sure that these seams are tucked down out of the way. Put a pin in where those two seams cross over each other. Manipulate the fabric so the edges are lined up, and put a pin in on this top edge where those 2 points cross over. You now have a little dog ear coming up here and a little dog ear going out in this direction. For this one, you need to start sewing on this inside edge, right where those two drawn lines cross over each other. Sew down to the bottom line where they cross over each other. Then, to make sure the fabric all looks the same from the front, you still have one little seam to go. So we've now sewn a pie shape into every corner of the points of the star. What we've got left here is where our first seam started and our last seam is crossing over. So we want this seam to cross over the top of the previous one. It's just a matter of turning it over, lining it up on that dog ear, and then we're going to sew from the outside edge down to where we started sewing the last time. So then we have our full circle complete. These extra bits here, you can just trim those back to the 1/4 inch line to reduce the bulk. And then it's just a matter of eyeing it all nice and flat. Now that we've sewn all our star points together, it's ready to do the reverse applique for the cheddar circle. Here I've got a square of batting, which I've drawn a 16-inch grid into and divided it into 4. This is just going to help with the positioning and placement of the fabrics. So what we need to do here is position our star so that these the top point and the bottom point are going to line up on this middle line, and this V point here is going to line up on the center line. So just keep fiddling around until you've got it nicely in position. That looks pretty straight. The batting also helps with positioning the cheddar fabric. Once you've cut your circle out of it, it's very easily distorted. So I found it quite hard to manipulate into being a perfect square without having something underneath to line it up on. So that's what these lines are for. Just position your square, the edges of your fabric, over the drawn lines, like so. Making sure that it's all nice and straight. Then we've got this edge here that we cut out with the scissors as per the pattern, and all we do is finger press that around, making it nice and smooth all around our drawn line. Once you're happy with the positioning of it and it's all nice and straight, you can use a little bit of glue to help hold all your layers together. So you can use applique glue, or I'm just using just a normal little glue stick. Just put a little bit of glue on the edge of the cream fabric and then press your cheddar fabric down over the top. Just add glue and a few more dollops around the edge of the fabric, and then you'll need to pin it down, and then it's just a matter of slip stitching down along the curved edge. Once you've glued it down in a few places, just add pins along the very edge, and when you're happy with everything and it's nice and straight, then you can remove it from the batting and slip stitch the edge.